What if I told you that the world's richest country is more of a paper value and that a slow growing economy might actually be a sign of success? Wait, stay with me. Because I'm about to flip everything you thought you knew about economic growth. If you follow the news regularly, you probably heard the term economic growth thrown around a lot. It's usually described in monetary terms. You can hear things like a country is $1 trillion economy, or the GDP per capita stands at a certain figure. But here's something most people don't stop to question. What do these numbers actually tell us? Let's start with the most commonly used measure, which is GDP, also known as gross domestic product. This is the total monetary value of everything a country produces. And here is where it gets interesting. When you use this aggregate figure to compare economies, you run into a major problem. A country with a larger population will always show a higher total GDP than a smaller country, regardless of how wealthy or well-off the people actually living there are. Think about it this way. A country with 500 million people will nearly always produce more in total than a country with just 10 million people. But that doesn't mean the people in that larger country are better off. The number is bigger, but it's been divided among far more people. And that's where GDP per capita comes in. GDP per capita simply takes the total GDP and divides it by the population. It gives you a much better picture of the average economic output and standard of living per person in a particular country. Let's give an example. For instance, USA and let's say Luxembourg. USA has a total GDP of about 29 to 30 trillion dollars, and Luxembourg, in contrast, has a GDP of about 90 billion dollars, which is a tiny comparison to the 30 trillion which the US has. But here's the twist. Luxembourg's GDP per capita is actually higher than that of the United States, because Luxembourg has a very small population of around 700,000 people. Each person's share of the national wealth works out to be around $137,000 compared to that of the US, which is about $85,000. That is why GDP per capita is often a far more meaningful number when we are talking about the actual prosperity of a nation. Now, this brings me to the second big idea, economic growth, and what it means when it slows down. You often hear phrases like the economy is stagnating or growth is only 1% this year, and they usually say it with like a tone of alarm. But here's the truth that rarely gets mentioned. There is a natural ceiling to how much any economy can grow at any given time, and a major factor in that ceiling is the human population. There is only so much a group of people can produce. It's virtually impossible for any country to sustain a high growth indefinitely. At some point, production capacity levels off. So when a highly developed country with a strong standard of living shows little or no growth, it may not be a crisis. It may simply mean that country has reached a point of economic maturity, and a lot of politicians like to, exploit this area. It might mean that they've built as much infrastructure, they've educated their workforce, and they've built enough industries. Some economies are operating near its productive ceiling. And in cases like this, what pushes these economies forward from that point of like economic ceilings is things like innovation, creativity, technology, and most importantly, immigration, which expand the workforce and brings in new skills and ideas. So the next time you hear that a developed country is experiencing slow growth or stagnation, always resist the urge to panic. For a nation that already has a high standard of living, reduced growth isn't necessarily a failure. It might simply be the natural phase they are in at that point in time. And that's not just an option, that's an economic reality. So usually when politicians or a lot of people are saying, oh, there's stagnation, there's growth, always get the context from where it's coming from. Have they maxed their growth? Is it a natural phase? Or maybe people are just using it for the sake of explanation or just to make the news. Yeah. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.